Hi, everybody. Welcome to the January event, which is getting data into ATAK. So this is the follow-on event from last month, where Mark Halliday did the getting the ATAK server installed on a Raspberry Pi. If you haven't seen it, you can find it in the Reese YouTube channel. Also with all the other stuff from all the other drone meetups that we've had. So tonight we're going to look into getting data into the ATAK server, which will then broadcast it out to our clients. So this kind of came from, I was talking to Mark at CivTAK, and I'd done quite a bit on how to do plugins for ATAK, and I realized I haven't really seen much on how to do ATAK server. And I will tell you that we're going to talk about how to get data into ATAK server, but there's still at least another hour that we could do for other ATAK server things, such as ATAK server plugins. So maybe sometime at a later date we can do that. But there's plenty much to chew on tonight. So I don't want to do too much. I've done that in the past where I've done an hour and a half, and I just think I'll lose people. So basically, I'm going to keep it simple, get you up and running if you want to get any data into your ATAK servers. So we're going to talk about latest news a little bit. The bulk of tonight's session is getting data into ATAK. And then next month, I'm thinking we're going to do a session on ArduPilot. So we've done a lot on PX4, DJI, QGC, and a lot on ATAK. I kind of feel like ArduPilot has been the redheaded stepchild. So I'm going to see if we can do a little bit of that, just to kind of cover the basics, and then compare it to PX4. I'm also thinking about doing a couple of university sessions, because I used to teach at university, Kettering University, where I'll go through the basics, because we've done this for a couple of years now. I think it would make sense to go through, here's the basics of ATAK and ATAK, here's the basics of PX4, just so people can catch up quicker if they want to, rather than have to go and look at the old playlists, and the stuff's probably out of date anyway. Okay, so the big news, of course, is that the ban, the FCC ban. So there is a ban on all foreign-made drones and components that came in December 23rd, as expected. A little bit different because it's all new foreign, not just Chinese-made drones and components are banned. And so this applies to new drone models, so not to the existing models or components. And also there are exceptions to that list, like the Blue UAS. So the Blue UAS is not part of that. I'm sure there's going to be more exceptions as things move on. So the biggest impact it's going to have is if you're looking for a DJI Mini 6, you ain't going to be able to get it, or a Mavic 5, Mavic Enterprise 5. We're not going to see it. Okay, so this is for tonight's meetup. We're going to start with a quick recap before we left off last month. Hats off to Mark again. I really enjoyed what he did. We'll talk about how to get remote access to your ATAK server. So it's all very fine installing everything in your Raspberry Pi, but how do you actually expose that remotely so that you can, it's not on your local, it's going to be on your local network. So how do you get that out to the internet in general so that your ATAK clients can hit it remotely? So we're going to talk about that. There's also lots of other ways of doing it, like you can put it on AWS. So it doesn't have to be on Raspberry Pi, it can be AWS if you want to. We touch on that a little bit too as well. There's also SitX, which is the Booz Allen Hamilton thing as well. I used that in the past. And that's probably going to be a session in the future where we talk about the SitX bridge adapters. So ATAK configuration. So how do I get my ATAK to talk to the ATAK server? So we'll cover that. While I was going over this the last few days and I was doing my examples, I realized that I hadn't really explained what cursor on target was. So there's a bunch of slides about what exactly CoT is. What is the format? Where do you find the specification? And then we have 3 examples that we're going to do. So we have a hello world. We have one that's doing following a remote ID. And then there's one which is using fake CAD data. So that's the 3 things that we're going to do. I think that's, if you follow along with what we're doing, it should be pretty obvious, how CoT works, what the shape of the schema, where to find out more information. So there's lots more there if you want to do that. And then I'm going to use two methods for getting the data into ATAK server. My favorite one is PyTAK. So I use Python all the time for lots of different work that I do internally, and for automation, for using LLMs, and also for a lot of the TAK stuff that we do. So Greg Albrecht wrote a library called PyTAK. So we'll talk about how to do our 3 examples in PyTAK. And then I know lots of people like Node-RED, which is kind of this low-code drag and drop interface, which we can talk to ATAK server to as well. I've used that in the past a lot with SITX, but I've just got an example here where we're just kind of doing a remote ID thing too as well. And then the resources, so all the links and all the code that I talk about in tonight's meetup will be in the resources. And I said earlier, I don't know if everybody got it, but I did share the link to these slides in the meetup. So in the meetup discussion, you can find the link to all this. So if you want to just have a look at the resources now and follow along, whatever you want to do, it's in there. I'm probably going to do that moving forward, just so that, well, you don't have to wait till the end. If you have to go do something else, you can get all the stuff. And maybe ask questions or prime your questions before we get there. So, okay, quick recap. So ATAK server, the way that we're using it, it's kind of a classic client server architecture. The ATAK server has inputs from different sources. So, computer-aided dispatch, IoT sensors, other APIs, broadcasted to the clients, carried by the first responder. So that could be ATAK. ITAK's probably TAK aware, and then WinTAK is probably TAK X now. So this is where the common operating picture comes from. So assuming you have the right permissions, you should be able to see what everybody else is seeing from the CAD stuff. And this can also be bidirectional. So one of the things is if we get some information about from computer-aided dispatch, it gets to our ATAK, and then we write a note, it should be able to go back to CAD2 as well. So because all of this exists, it should be plug and play. And as new data sources come online, we should be able to plug them into the ATAK server to update everybody's information. So it doesn't have to just be these things. It could be lots of different things. Okay. So last month, like I said, we did the Raspberry Pi install. The server is sitting behind a firewall. So we need a way to tunnel into it to make our connections. So the two options are out there are ngrok and Cloudflare. So the one that I use, and I use an awful lot for all the stuff that we do internally, like we did a call center IVR replacement thing on one of our meetups, and we use ngrok to basically tunnel into your local machine, but still be able to hit it remotely from Twilio, so we could call Twilio and get to the local host. Similarly with ATAK, if you want to get to ATAK to your Raspberry Pi, I'll show you how to use ngrok to do that. You do have some other options as well, which is probably more common for larger environments. You'd put something up on AWS or some other cloud provider, so you wouldn't have to worry about getting in there. I have a bunch of slides that I can add for extra if you want to. If people have interest in AWS, because we set up AWS too as well. And then not to leave out one of the options I know a lot of people have used is the SITX server from Booz Allen. So back in the day when ATAK server was a real pain to set up, a lot of people would use the SITX server then from PAR before they got bought by BAH. So that's another option if you want to do that as well. If you don't want the hassle of going through setting up Raspberry Pis or AWS servers. But for the moment, let's focus on the Raspberry Pi, seeing as that's what we did last month. Just makes a lot of sense to just continue on with that. So what do we need to do? So you go into your Raspberry Pi, you want to make sure that you install, the main thing you need is this snap. So you're installing the snap daemon. You want to install this added thing called ngrok, which is, it's a website, so it's ngrok.com. And what it does is it creates a tunnel. So when you call whatever the ngrok exposed domain is, it's find its way to get inside to your Raspberry Pi. Hold on, I gotta let somebody else in. And then you need to go to ngrok.com and then add your auth token. And then you just basically need to reboot the Raspberry Pi afterwards. So this is what it looks like on the dashboard for ngrok. little bit more complicated for the Raspberry Pi. So usually if you're using a Windows and you want to ngrok anything, you just say ngrok TCP and then 8089 for if that's the port that you're trying to do, and it'll basically give you a domain and you just take that domain. Raspberry Pi, because it's Linux based, it's a bit different. We get all sorts of wonderful weird ports. So this is the port for certificate provisioning, and this is the port for ATAK signaling. And then when we call each of these things that we're trying to do, if we're trying to pass our certificates, we're going to pass it to this port and this domain that's actually an internet domain. And then the other one here being another internet domain with a port, which is the one that's going to get us for our ATAK signaling. So it's a little bit more complicated. I do have an AWS one in there where, because it's already in the internet, we don't have to do that. But if like Andrew, you're using a Raspberry Pi, you're going to have to follow this to get it to work externally. Okay. So then we need a YAML file, a YML file for ngrok. You can find it by going ngrok config check, and then you just edit it, whether you're using Nano or Vi or whatever it is that you use to edit on your Raspberry Pi. And what you want to do then is you want to make sure that from your dashboard, you take whatever these addresses are here with their ports, put them into your YAML file. You need your auth token. This is not a real one. I've changed it. It knows who you are and allows you to do that. ngrok, I haven't paid for it yet, but and I have it up and running for days at a time, but they do have a paid option if you want to keep your domain address. I think that's the way they get you. So otherwise you have to keep changing your YAML file. Okay, so here we have the ATAK signaling, which is on always going to be on port 8089. So somebody coming in is going to hit it on this port to get to 8089, and for the certificate provisioning, which is usually 8446, you basically have this one that you set up. So once you get this up and running, pretty straightforward. Don't worry about it afterwards. Okay, so you want to validate your configuration, and then you just want to start everything again. Okay, so that's the first part, so which is making sure we have remote access to our Raspberry Pi. Next thing that we want to do is we want to set up our ATAK. I'm not going to go into the certs too much because Mark did a pretty good job at it last time. So if you don't know how to do it, I would suggest going back, looking at his talk. It's right at the end, and we're just going to cover a little bit. And then we're going to talk about how, once we have those certs, how do I import them into my Android phone or other device so that I can talk to the ATAK server. So like I said, most of this was covered before. So you got a sudo, which means you're logging in as the ATAK user. You want to go to the certs directory. There's some configuration that you have to do to set this up, but you do make cert and find ATAK, and it's going to create all the certs for you. You want to find a way, because it's on a Raspberry Pi, you want to make sure that you can get those out onto something else. So you want to copy we want the P12 and the trust store. Here I'm just changing back to the Ubuntu user, and then I'm copying them onto a remote server so I can basically import them into my Android phone. Okay. And then within ATAK, so basically you open up ATAK. What you do is you go settings. We'll get lots of people tonight. Oh no, lost them. Okay, so navigate to settings, network preferences, network connection preferences, and I have a video that shows how to do this in a second. Manage server connections from the hamburger menu. Okay, and then click the three dots to create a new server connection. So up here, in this case, I'm using AWS. I'm just using the IP address from AWS. You want to make sure that you check the advanced options, and within the advanced options, you want to import the two P12 files that we just talked about. You need the trust store and the client certificate. And in this case, the port that we're using is 8089. If you were using the Raspberry Pi, you would change it to the one that ngrok gave you. Okay, which I will show you in a second. Hopefully this video works. So, yep. So this is the one for ngrok. This is the server port that it gave me. This is the two different ones that I wanted. And in this case, I'm kind of showing you what we did further ahead. I think what we're doing is, I'll just speed it up a bit, showing the remote ID that we are going to talk about a little bit later. So because this is a drone meetup, I wanted to have something that actually was drone related. In this case, we're just have a fake remote ID that's showing where the drone is going east across Square Lake in Michigan, or Troy, Michigan. Okay. All right. So here's what you're all here for. So how do we send data to TAK? So TAK speaks cursor on target. So that's basically its XML messages. So this has been around since the early 2000s. So back in the day, JSON was around, but XML was still, used by a lot of companies. There's tons of different things that we had to do with SOAP back in the day. So XML and JSON were kind of like the two major payloads that everybody was using. I would say that 99% of all new stuff now is JSON. Never really see XML anymore. It's pretty rare, but there's no reason why we can't use it. It's fine. We send these CoT messages or XML messages using either the PyTAK library from my buddy Greg Albrecht, and then otherwise we can use Node-RED, and we'll look at both. And then what exactly are we sending to the TAK server? Well, I showed you the image earlier on about the client-server architecture. So typically what I expect would be, computer-aided dispatch data. I'd expect IoT sensors. That's how I got into this in the first place. We were doing in this competition, and we were pulling in lots of IoT sensor information and displaying it on ATAK. We have remote ID, so you get to get remote ID information. And then there's lots of other stuff like the UAS plugin tool would give drone. We could get camera video across UDP. So there's lots of things that we can send. But for the moment, we're going to keep it relatively simple. So we're going to have 3 examples. So we have the Hello World example, which I took from the PyTAK library. We have remote ID and the computer-aided dispatch. So for the computer-aided dispatch, we do have access to real computer-aided dispatch information, but I'm not going to use it tonight. I would say ChatGPT created the CAD stuff that we did this evening. I've used the ChatGPT a lot for generating cursor on target stuff. It seems to speak it quite well. So if you're trying to create other examples, you can feed it the spec and ask it to generate some CoT information for you. If you're not a programmer, it's a really good way to start. Okay, so before we look at the examples, let's talk about what exactly is CoT. So it's, like we said, it's XML-based messaging standard. It's defined by a series of XML schemas, which are known as XSDs. The link is in the resources to that if you want to find it. So the ATAK source code, the updated version, is now available, and within that there are the XML schemas which define what these different things are. So it defines what an event is, defines what a point is, defines what extra detail could be. But you can get away with the most minimal version here. So this is probably the simplest XML you'll ever see. So we have, what is the version of XML? It's always going to be there. The event version is going to be typically 2. And then we have a UID, which is just a global unique identifier. So that can be anything that you want. The type is a hint about the event type that's within our CoT XML. So in this case, it's A for atomic, H for hostile, A for air, M for military, F for fixed wing, U for unmanned, and then military again. So basically what you're doing is the event is telling you what kind of event is coming in. We'll talk about those types a little bit in a few minutes. And then we have the time where this has occurred, and then we have how long it expires. So usually it's like an hour later is when in this case, it's 2 minutes. So if you have this event, it goes to your TAK server, it appears in your ATAK. 2 minutes later, it's going to disappear off it. So you're going to expect to have those events updated Most of the examples we have today are kind of would be an hour or so. We have the point, we have the lat long where it occurred. In this case, we have an optional detail field and there's nothing in there. So we have the lat long, latitude and longitude. We have the circular error in meters. We have HAE, which is the height above ellipsoid, and then linear error. Okay. So here is a table which came from the spec. Like I said, some of the resources. So we have, at its most basic, a CoT message has an event, which is version type, UID, time, start, still, how. So usually there's a how in there. So how is it generated? So is it machine generated? Is it generated by a human? I've never gone onto these OPEX quality of service or access. Point, lat long, HAE, we talked about that before, and the detail, if you want to put some remarks in there or something else to help the person who's looking at your marker, if that makes sense. Okay, so somebody asked me a question. Have you run into problems with the how field? Without that field, federation isn't possible. Interesting to know. No, I haven't run into problems with it, but I usually put it in there anyway, just as the default. Okay. Okay, so here is the breakdown of the type field. So we have A for atomic, happens right now, pending, unknown, assumed friend, suspect, hostile, joker, faker, etc. And then you have the different types. So I'm usually on the air, and then we have ground, so that we have one ground version today. Okay, so let's talk about we're going to start with our three examples. We have three examples. We have the hello world one that come from the PyTAK library, which we're going to use to send messages to our server. We are going to do a remote ID, which we're basically just pretending, again, I generated from ChatGPT. We're pretending that the drone is flying in an eastward fashion at, I think it's 15 meters per second or 1.5 meters per second. We'll find out in a bit. This one is a marker that is in Central Park in New York. Okay, link again is in the resources. So here's the CoT message we're sending using the PyTAK library. So the code to generate it, I'll show you in a second. But we have AHAMA, so that's atomic, hostile, airborne, military attack. Sorry, somebody else has got a question. They might keep me honest here, but you ATAK OS coming soon. No idea. I really don't know what is the story of ATAK X and where everything is going, but I think that's for a future event. Okay, so the UID in this case, it's like I said, I just stole it from the example. Name your marker. I would expect it to be something else. MG is machine generated. We have the time 109. I think this is in UTC. Then stale is 209, so it's going to last for an hour. And then we have the lat long of the point, which just goes to Central Park. Okay, so what I want to do is just talk a little bit about the code that is in our, that comes from the PyTAK library. So this is Python code that is generating this XML that we send to our ATAK server. So it is called the gen CoT function. So it creates an XML event called event, which we know, it's version 2. We set different attributes for it. These are all kind of hard coded. If you were doing this like for CAD data, basically you would just set it up with variables that you would enter into your PyTAK code, and then you would send it off to the ATAK server. But it's a good place to start because we're just doing a hello world, so it doesn't really matter. So we have our UID, we have our how, our time, our start, and then we have our time. So we're just adding stale time to whatever the time is that we set before. We have our lat long and our different values for HAE for our errors. And then basically at the end, we have the function serializes the XML structure to bytes and returns it. So this is generating it, it's not sending it yet. So we do need to know how to send it. So within Python, this is basically the way you send it. So I am using the version from AWS for this, but it's I will put code up for the Raspberry Pi 2 as well. It's just this with a different different port, which is whatever the one we got from ngrok. So we're sending it via TLS, so it's secure. So TLS is, we need certificates for TLS. So this is basically SSL version 2 or whatever version it is. So it's going to be encrypted as we send it, which obviously is important if you're sending the data. You don't want to be sending it in clear text across the internet because somebody else might be sniffing it. It's important if it's CAD data that you want to make sure that this is encrypted. And it's pretty easy to encrypt it. So you need the following things. So you need a client cert that we generated. When we were doing our cert generation and getting our P12s, we were also generating our client cert and our client key. So you want to make sure that you keep those. There was a password that was set up as part of that in our configuration. So you want to make sure that that's in there too as well. I think TAK user is the default. Obviously don't use password, come up with your own. And then you got to make sure that you don't verify the TLS because otherwise it does an extra round trip. If anybody's got a way around this, please let me know, but I haven't got it to work without saying don't verify. Okay, so what are we doing? So the main function begins creating configuration objects. We have a config parser, populates it with the config detail, with the all the certificates and the passwords. So it initializes the CLI tool, which from the PyTAK library with the configuration, sets up the tasks and queues within the tool and adds a custom serializer to handle CoT event generation and queuing. And then it evokes the tool's run loop to start all the tasks. So it's not going to just send this once, it's going to send it multiple times. So because as we send our stuff to the TAK server, it's going to be multiple things over and over again. So, okay, let me get out of this real quick and see if I can run it. And show you what it looks like. My phone is connected. Okay. All the code is already on the server if you want to play with it. Let's see which one I needed. So this is the CoT URL. I changed the password to restack. I think it might be this one. Yep, okay, so Python single. Another trick that you can use if you want is, I have to scroll out here. And I can show you where it is. So you can see I have a different map, but yes, it's in New York, in Central Park. Great. So that worked. Another thing you can do, which is cool, if you do log standard out instead of sending it to this TLS here. So let's try this real quick. Stop it. And if I did it right, now it's sending me, it's giving me where the events are. So if you have a problem and you're trying to debug what's going on, this is a great way to see if your CoT is actually going out correctly or not. Okay, let's get back to our stuff. So the next one that we're going to do is remote ID. So we have to do something with that's drone related because this is drone. It's a drone software meetup. So this one, what it's doing is I'm sending it a CoT message, which is not static. Basically, it's changing. It's got the drone is going east on East Square Lake Road, which is just up the road from where my office is. And the idea is, the concept is that we're tracking a remote ID from some sensor, from some counter UAS sensor, and then we're passing that on an ATAK so people can see what's going on. So what do we have? So we have the version is 2 as usual. We have the type, which is atomic, friendly, airborne, military, unmanned aircraft. So it's a UAS. We give it a UID. We say it's machine generated. We have our times, and as you can see, the stale here is a couple of seconds because I wanted to disappear, so we get that kind of the look that it's traveling It's actually traveling instead of just seeing lots of those drone icons. By the way, those drone icons, if you're not aware, come from the NATO icon set. So hence the reason why it looks like that. That's not really a choice that we have. It's always going to be that. Okay, so the altitude is 120 meters above the ellipsoid. It is heading 90 degrees. We have some details. So the last one we didn't have any details. We have a call sign. So it'll have drone remote ID. Its speed is 15 meters per second. The standard is it's simulated, so it's not a real one. Then the message type is identity and telemetry. So basically within the detail, you can do lots of stuff that you want to do. And then maybe at the end, what you want to have is some logging information. So you can put some remarks in there too as well. So long as you follow this kind of XML type spec, you can create whatever you want. Okay, the code to change the CoT, to create the CoT so that in order that we can create the XML to send to the ATAK server. It's kind of hard coded here, but it's very similar to what you saw before. There's not really anything. We got our type, which is different type. Oops. And then we also have, different sub elements. So it's, if you want to add detail, basically what you're doing is you have a root element and you have a sub element. So I'm just showing you how you want to do that. The PyTAK library is pretty cool. If you have any Python experience, it's pretty straightforward. So the first one was the simplest. The second one is using detail. So you've got some more information. The third one is we're kind of faking it. So it's pulling in information from a fake computer-aided dispatch system, which we want to send to our ATAK server. So in this case, I've got lots of, again, what I was doing here is I had a ChatGPT create a bunch of REST APIs to start sending out computer-aided dispatch information. I didn't want to use real data for obvious reasons, but most modern CAD systems will have some sort of a REST API that we can hit to pull the relevant information. So you can, if you hit the REST API, you can get the information on whatever's happening within each of these different incidents. And then you can also have a REST API that you can hit to update information. So you can send information back to the CAD system so that the users can see what's happening. So you have this kind of bidirectional thing going on. You also have to have some sort of an authentication to get the data. So that's typically OAuth 2 these days. So you exchange keys for a temporary access token to view the data. But otherwise, it's kind of the same as what we've already done. Although now what we have is we have JSON that's coming in. So in this third example, we have this JSON that I'm pretending is coming in from our CAD system. And then we have to do something with taking that JSON and turning it into the XML that are caught in an XML format that the ATAK server can understand. This is, I asked ChatGPT to generate the following JSON showing an incident near me in Michigan. And we have to basically take the type in this case. What do we have that's different? We have a type that's AUG, which says it's a ground event. The time, start, stale. We have the points. We have some remarks in here, which says it's, basically, there's a warrant out for Johnny Smith for his arrest at this address, which is 2590 Main Street. And so here's the CoT version of our JSON. I also have the code if you want to check this out up online, if you want to see that too as well. So it's the Python code is called cad_data.py in the GitHub repo. Now we've basically taken our JSON, converted it into something that ATAK server can understand. The type, how, where it's happening. I have something slightly different here where I'm using an icon that's not part of the icon set. So in this case, what we have to do is send out the icons too as well. This one is for the C. I've also seen where people color it different colors based on what the incident is, or whether somebody's actually gone out to the incident. So you can put some information on that too as well. And then we have some remarks in here, so which would be passed on to the person using ATAK, so they can get the whatever the history information is from the CAD system without having to access it manually. Okay, this is what it looked like. So let me see if I can run that code. See, my events are still going there. Okay. Let's just show what the CoT data is. Okay, so you can see. Oops. Oh, it's looking for Saturday JSON. Sorry, it's not going to work. Messed up. Okay, well, at least we have the video that you saw. I'll go back to it and see if we can get it running when we're doing the questions. Okay, so essentially what's going to happen is when you get it up and running, it's going to show a C, and it's going to show it this fake address. It's just using the lat long instead of what the actual address was. Okay, so if you're not a Python developer, then you might want to try Node-RED as an alternative. So while Node-RED is a low-code option, we still need to put some code in here to do the JSON to XML conversion. I did get this code from Greg Albrecht. He helped us out with a project before, so I'm borrowing a lot of what he did before. But a lot of people like Node-RED because it's pretty obvious what's going on. So in this case, what we have is we have an inject, which is a sample drone input. We have a function, which is going to take that information and convert it to TAK. We are uploading a TAK tool, which will allow us to send our information to AWS, and then AWS will pass it to our phone. So what are the steps that we need to do that? I'm a huge fan of Windows Systems Linux, so it saves me from having to install a dual boot Linux on my PC. Easy for me to say. Say that again. Yeah, I can hear you. I want to see what the question is. Gaussian splat import. So you're importing an image. Yeah, there's no reason why you can't put images and videos within TAK. It's just not an example I've done in here, but I can certainly do one tomorrow and show you what that would look like. That's two things I have to do for you, Android. For you, Andrew. Okay, where were we? So yeah, so we have. If you're Windows users, like it's 90% of the world are. So basically, what you have to do is you got to make sure that WSL is on your machine already installed. So just type WSL. You will start up an Ubuntu client, which will look something like this. If you don't have it installed, you have to do WSL install. You got to reboot your machine, and then you're good to go. And then you do sudo snap install Node-RED, and then you start Node-RED. I started a different port because I already had something on port 8000, so Node-RED -- port 8080. And it comes up. So here's what it looks like. So here's Node-RED running. So here's the example that I have. The cool thing about it is that you can drag and drop all this stuff to make up whatever workflow that you want. So we have the world's simplest workflow here. What do we have? So if I click on this, I have this payload, which is kind of sort of the remote ID thing we did before. So we have a UAS ID, the operator, timestamp, the location, velocity, status. This code gets a bit more complicated. The topic, we're giving it a topic, which is drone in. So this is a bit more complicated. So there is, this is kind of like real code here. So what do we have is we are basically taking each of the different things that are coming in from our injection. We're giving it a variable, and then we are creating our information for a CoT payload so that we can, it's not hardwired anymore. We're passing information. So as all this information comes in from our sample drone input, it's going to be able to pass that on to our TAK thing here. So this within TAK, what you have to do if you want to add extra things, you basically have to add some extra flows. Is it manage palette? Yeah. So within manage palette, you do install, and then in this case, what I did is I installed Node-RED contrid TAK. So now I have this thing which will basically take the JSON that I'm passing in and will convert that to XML. and then to the CoT messages. So we have JSON here, we have CoT here, we pass that CoT into our ATAK server. And within our ATAK server, what we do is we send it to the AWS server, in this case, port 8089. We have a TLS configuration, which means that I have to upload the PEM file and the key file that we had before in the passphrase. And save on. And if all goes well, I have to open my phone again. Okay, should be somewhere around there. Oh no, the demo gods, don't do this to me. All right, I'll have to see if I can find that in a second. Seems to have gone AWOL on me. Okay, it did send it because it's connected and it's running. Successfully injected. Oh, there it is. I got it now.
Will Node-RED bring an entire file structure into ATAK that you already pre-built?
It will take in anything that is follows the CoT schema. So the CoT schema is defined here, and there are XSD. This is all in the notes, by the way. So we have here event point. So basically, this is a schema. So you can basically feed this to your favorite, whatever it is that you're, I would basically take this, give it to ChatGPT, say, give me the CoT version of whatever it is that you're trying to send. And it should give you a CoT version of whatever it is you're trying to send, and you should be fine. Because what it's going to do is it's just going to follow whatever the schema says is valid. If it's valid, ATAK should be able to read it. ATAK should be able to read it. Then it should display on your ATAK or your ATAK accordingly. Okay, let me get back to where we were. All right, so just go through a little bit what we said. So what I did was I started by defining an inject node to mock the remote ID data. I added a function node. So if you go to the left-hand side, you basically just pull across a function. Stole the code from Greg Albrecht to copy the function into a format that could be passed to the ATAK server, basically defining the variables, passing the meta information for the CoT event, and then passing the point and the final detail attributes. And then basically what you do is you just pass the message, the entire payload. And then we want to convert the ATAK JSON to XML. So we click on the hamburger menu, manage palette, install, look for that Node-RED contrib ATAK that I showed you, install that. And then the last thing that we need to do is we need to drag across a server, which is in this case AWS ATAK server. We have got to say, how are we communicating it over TCP? We are talking, in this case, this is my developer being super secure and not putting his IP address in, but guarantee my Amazon's going to go down right after this meeting, so it doesn't really matter. So we have our ATAK server IP, whatever that would be, port 8089. The TLS configuration is AWS. You got to upload the PEM file and the key file, and then enter the password, and then you should be good to go. Like I said, then we have the entire flow. It's about the simplest flow you'll ever get in Node-RED. And then we deploy and inject the data, and it shows up similar to the previous one that I had, which is what I was showing on the phone. Okay, we could spend literally another hour talking about syntax or the bridge adapters, because that's another way to do this. We could talk about security, because we are sending our information over TLS. But there are definitely things that you can do to lock down your server so that there are not open ports. so that people can't gain access to you. We could talk about doing more on the TAK server, so we could parse the data that's coming in for our CoT messages. For example, maybe we don't care about friendlies, we only care about displaying hostile events, so we can parse that data too. But I'm gonna have to leave that for another day, because otherwise we're gonna be here till well past the hour, and I want to leave some time for questions. And then I wanted to give you this information too as well. So we have this is the MITRE spec. So this is when I was talking about what CoT is. So lots of information here. So if you want to find out more or pass it to your favorite LLM to get it to tell you how this is all put together, that might be good. The second thing is, which I showed you, which is the where the XSDs are. Then we have, this is the PyTAK library. So within here, this is the second one is the example that I use. So the send and receive TAK data. So like I said, it's bidirectional, so it will go both ways. So that's cool. And then the last thing is on the TAK server, we have my hello world. We have the remote ID, the Python for that. I have my CAD data. And then we have I have the two versions, what the data is incoming and what the data is outgoing for CoT. And then the Node-RED stuff, if you want to follow along, I have the JSON and I have the function that was in there if you want to do that too as well. That is it. So with that, I'm going to see if anybody has any questions. Come on, Andrew, you must have something.
A small question about GitHub. Can you give us a little explanation about how you use it and, you know?
Oh yeah, that's easy. So if you ever want to download the code from GitHub, you just go to wherever it is and you go here and you just say download zip file and it will download everything for you. So you don't need, you can install you can do it from the command line. But if you're not used to doing that, it's just as easy to just download it and then unzip it, and you have all the data right there. There's also desktop versions that you can use where it will hide the complexity for you. But GitHub is a server where people basically store all their, all their code that they want to share with other users. So we use it all the time. For any of the projects that we do, it's either on GitHub or GitLab. That's typically the way it works. So like here, we go here, this is another GitHub repo. This is where the latest version of the ATAK civilian is, which is usually one or two versions behind, minor versions behind the military one. So this was updated 2 months ago. So this is really quite recent. There's been years where this hasn't got an update. So it's great. It got updated around the time of CivTAK, which is excellent news. So that's if you want to find out more, there's lots of stuff in here. So this is where I would go next when I want to find out about creating plugin examples for the TAK server. This is the place to go. And
you would use that rather than using the Play Store, correct?
The one in the Play Store is that's not a developer build, so that's the production build. So if you were using if you're not developing, you always use the one in Play Store. If you are developing, so for example, you want to make your own ATAK plugin. So say, for example, we get that CoT data and it passes us that image that you want to pass or the Gaussian splat that you want to pass. But ATAK core app doesn't know how to display that. So what you would do is you create an extension, a plugin, which would basically display that like a satellite image or a tile or something. So the plugins allow you to have more functionality that's in the base app. But if you're not going to do that, then you would just use the base app from Google Play. Okay, now, I got a bunch of questions. Okay, you guys are great. Okay, so maybe this doesn't fit the session, but curious, when should one publish data to ATAK server via streaming data feed configured on the server, as opposed to the standard default port 8089? I'm assuming that's for video, but I don't know off the top of my head. I'll ask one of my developers and get back to you, Greg. Have you found any limitations regarding the frequency or amount of CoT messages being pushed out to the ATAK server? Well, that's really depending on how big your server is. So if we do this in production, we're going to use an Amazon server or a Linux box. You can use a Raspberry Pi, and I know that Mark has talked about using it for, a small office with 10 to 12 people. But if you have hundreds of people, I would not use a Raspberry Pi. I would use something in the cloud like DigitalOcean or AWS, where it has a lot more oomph and a lot more capability. Do you know of an Android SDK to post CoT to ATAK? No. But are you talking about going from ATAK to back to ATAK? John?
Yeah, just like, for example, if there was a DJI app that was doing some recognition, let's say on the video, and then creating a CoT event to post over the tag.
You would just take the code that I gave you for Python. You would just take that and convert it to Kotlin, and then send the data back in whatever format makes sense. But that's, if what you're trying to do is very much achievable if anybody's written any Android. And if you get stuck, just let me know. Happy to help.
And wouldn't Node-RED actually deal with that as the incoming?
Yes, it would, but where he's talking about doing it from Android, which would be from ATAK. So you're basically, the clients are bi-directional, so you can send information from ATAK back to the ATAK server and then share it with other people. So typically, in my mind, what you would do would be to take the data and either send it back as JSON and get the ATAK server to deal with it, or send the data back as CoT and then just get the ATAK server to send it to everybody else. Okay, and then can you Brian Indy says, can you briefly explain how telemetry is extracted from drone in real time? It depends on what the drone is, but it's a Mavlink command for a PX4 drone. You just ask it for the PX4 is an SDK, so anything that is an SDK will be able to gain access via Mavlink to the telemetry, and then once you have it within whatever the app is on your phone or on your Windows box or on your Linux box, you can then pass it to the ATAK server, and the ATAK server can send it anywhere else. Yeah, look, UAS tool is great from the Power/PAH folks. And that's a plugin inside of the core base ATAK app. And you don't need any developer experience for that. You can just install it, and it works pretty good. And it's on the Play Store as well.
It's really interesting when you get your DJI going through what's an open video server, and it looks like ISR. And during a work group, we actually flew a fixed wing airplane, had it all coming through our ATAK, and you can do it with a drone. That UAS tool is very significant.
Yep, it's great. I better not say anything else because I'll incriminate myself. Okay, in a good way. So, anything else, guys? I really appreciate you turning up. This is the highest percentage of people signing up who actually turned up for the meeting. So if you have any questions, I'm always here, more than happy to help. We do a ton of this stuff all day, every day. So this was really interesting, and I really enjoyed doing this. So happy to do some more if you guys want it. Thanks, guys.
Yes, please bring some more.
Walter, do any containerization? Yeah, you could. There's no reason why you couldn't. You could do this in Docker and use that to just push out to different VM, to different cloud. But I'm a bit old school. I like the bare metal, but that's just me. Thanks, guys.
I just want to remind everybody to check us out on YouTube, and if you're watching us on YouTube, to like and subscribe. We just got monetized, so thanks everybody for helping us get up to that point. We also write articles or tutorial versions of most of the meetups, so check that out on reese.com on the blog. And there's going to be a QR code to sign up for the newsletter right about now.